Here in Texas, it is a cloudy day. Dew points have fallen off a little bit into the low 60s, but there's still quite a bit of moisture around. We can see that here on the surface chart, looking across Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas. The flow is out of the north. Normally that's a drying, cooling flow. However, we're just not really moving much moisture out of the picture. And as we can see down in the Gulf, there's still a little bit of an onshore flow with a frontal boundary just to the south there. And this time of year, we do have to be concerned about the dry line. However, as we go to the west, dew point of 66 there at Monclova, and it's just kind of a very gradual drop off of dew point. And I think it's probably sitting right about here. You can see that 23-degree dew point. So pretty much along the Sierra Madre Oriental, I think that's the name of it, that mountain range right there. And as we go further to the northwest, you can see we get into some of that easterly flow there, upslope flow there in Midland, Hobbs, Carlsbad, and Clovis. And typically with that kind of upslope flow, if there's enough moisture snaking its way up the Pecos River Valley, we can get some storms going, but as you can see, the dew points here are not really optimal, just lots of 40s. So, yeah, the front has taken its toll on the moisture and pushed it to the south. But of course, we're going to keep an eye on the dew point field in case any of it starts flowing back north over the next couple of days. All right, time to take a look at that surface chart. Looks like we got a frontal system from just north of Atlanta to just north of Houston. And as we pointed out, that kind of recurves up through the mountains of New Mexico. And we find that in northwestern Colorado, up to the Ogden, Utah area. And then we have this front extending south through Las Vegas down towards Mojave. Behind that, a flow of cool air. And as you'll see shortly on the thickness charts, a cold pool around Reno and Redding and Sacramento. You can see that cool 46-degree temperature there at Reno. In Texas, you can see that northerly flow there driven by this ridge extending down from the Dakotas into Nebraska and a 1035 millibar high in Saskatchewan. And then a frontal wave out there in the Carolinas. That seems to be a distinct separate system from this other one up in the Great Lakes area, just a little wedge of warm air. You can see the 60-degree temperatures up there in Quebec, contrasting with the 40s and a few 30s out to the west. And they are getting snow there in northern Michigan, some snow being reported at International Falls, all the way up towards the area northwest of Thunder Bay, Ontario. And then a checkup in Canada, since that's usually the supply line coming south. 1040 millibar high across the Hudson Bay region. So this is probably co-located with a Hudson Bay vortex. And then out to the west, a new Pacific front barreling into the southeast Alaska region. And you can see temperatures in Yukon almost coming up to 50 degrees up there north of Whitehorse. And even though things are kind of stormy in that part of Alaska, very strong warm-up coming. You can see that frame right there. It's hard to see, but there's 20 Celsius. That's 68 degrees, almost 70 Fahrenheit. That's around the Ketchikan area. And we're expecting widespread 60s throughout much of that part of Alaska as you go south down along the coast. Also, 70s popping up around Vancouver, Victoria, and Seattle. This is a good time to talk about that upper level pattern. We have a Rex block right there, a low between California and Hawaii, and a cutoff high near British Columbia. Downstream, a couple of lows right there with troughing, and that blocking pattern right there is going to help keep this pattern in place in the U.S. for probably the next 3 to 5 days. Aside from that, a southern stream running through the southwest U.S., maybe a couple of branches right there, one up in the Midwest, another further south, and then a northern branch up there in Alaska and the Northwest Territories. So what happens? How does this evolve? How does it shape our forecast. Well, running forward into Friday and Saturday, you can see not much change in the weather pattern in the U.S. Even by Sunday, pretty similar, with lots of troughing in the Great Lakes area, this little cutoff low shearing off in Utah, and this very strong ridge helping to pump up those temperatures in southeastern Alaska and down towards Washington. Rounding that ridge right there, some northerly flow coming in through the Canadian prairies, so it looks like more cold weather, at least for the prairies, down to the Great Lakes and Midwest. And running this through into next week, that northerly freight train of cold air pretty much continuing. Very deep low getting established in the Gulf of Alaska. The ridge has kind of broken down, so we may start seeing some waves start to enter the west coast, and I think that's one right there around Wednesday. So things will probably start getting a little more stormy towards the end of next week. So there's one wave setting up in the high plains of Texas, Kansas, and here comes the next stuff upstream. And we still got to contend with this northerly flow in Canada. That is not quite shut off, and we still got that little Hudson Bay vortex going there. And my frames are jumping all over the place. Let's try that again. Okay, so anyway, the wave's starting up towards the end of next week, and a little bit of ridging there over the weekend, 24th, 25th. I think there could be some storm potential as we start opening up the Gulf, and then we get this really strong wave towards the 26th, 27th. And you can see that really digs in pretty good there around Wednesday, Thursday. Now, with that, we tend to get kind of a unidirectional flow pattern. See that right there? That favors squall lines, linear complexes, that kind of thing. So that could be what we're in for around the 28th. However, this is 330 hours out, so we're not going to put a whole lot of stock in that. Now, yesterday I was eminently clear how useful the 850 millibar dew point and winds were for picking apart the severe weather potential. So let's take a closer look at that chart. Let's check out the legend down there. I don't know if you can see that well. I try to keep that as far off to the bottom as I can, but I'm going to bring that up a little bit. And what we see here, this is in Celsius. We can see dark green is going to be low 60s, down to light green, which is 50s Fahrenheit. And then when we pick up the blue, that's going to be mid 60s to low 70s dew points. And if we get any purple, that's going to be solidly in the 70s. So that's one good thing to keep in mind. If you have brown, that's going to be 30s, 20s, and even drier. So really, to get storm potential, we need to be up in this range right here. They're going to be elevated in Texas this time of year if dew points are in the 40s, which is about that range right there. And once we get into the 50s, we start getting into some more organized severe potential. And then 60s, that'd be about right here, the blues and so on, that's going to be solid severe weather potential if there's the instability and all that. However, this is also 850 millibar dew point up at 5,000 feet. So this may not necessarily represent the kind of moisture you have down in the lower part of the lower atmosphere. But this is a good baseline because if we have moisture showing up here, there's a darn good chance it's going to be extending throughout the column down to the surface. So we start out with southerly flow. Okay, so the Gulf is slightly open. Not a whole lot of moisture to work with, but it is there. Let me put it in this area along Interstate 45. We'll just look at the profile starting out for today, and it does have some depth from mid 60s. This is actually not too bad. And then it tapers off above 3,000 feet down into the 40s. But the big problem we have is not much lapse rate right there. The shear is not great, 45 to 55 knots, but we just don't have much instability. And you can see the capes down there. Yeah, some of them are forecasting 2,000 capes, but that's not what I see. I see it more in the range of 600 to 1,000. Not very well capped, so we could get some isolated storms going as heating picks up today. So let's run this forward and see what happens. Get that scale on there. And we're kind of looking at the overall trend of the moisture. We see that it starts heading more up towards the hill country and the Edwards Plateau. Now, I know this is very Texas-centric. I know a lot of you are not in Texas. You're probably in Oklahoma, in Memphis, and so on. But as you can see, they're under northerly flow, so there's just not much to talk about in terms of severe weather potential right now. But as this moisture works its way north, we'll follow those areas a little closer. So the moisture concentrates a little bit, and we get this little axis going up to Dallas around Friday. A little bit of cyclogenesis out in the panhandles. However, obviously we're looking at upper 50s dew points up at 850. That's not going to be all that great. Sounding around Dallas on Friday. Well, it looks like we're capped for one. Some good 700 through 850 millibar lapse rates there. But, you know, like I said, we are capped and the moisture is not really all that deep. And then going into next week, let's just kind of quickly go through, see how things evolve. Big blast of cool air coming south, drying things out. The moisture sweeps out towards Mississippi and Louisiana for Saturday and Sunday. So obviously we're shut down here over the weekend. We're shut down into Monday and Tuesday, but some moisture starts feeding north into the San Antonio, Austin area. Is that enough to work with? Probably not. See that dew point right there starts out at 50 and tapers off into 40s and 30s. And the lapse rate not terribly impressive. So no severe weather potential around then. Now you can see there's offshore flow. Return flow sets up for Wednesday with the next wave coming north. Some measly little moisture right there. That looks like 50s dew points. So as you can see, we're not going to be all that great. That looks like overrunning right there. That's a frontal inversion. So that's going to spell elevated storms, maybe forming out of that layer there. But the lapse rate's not that great. Some good shear there, but that's not going to be a pattern that's going to be surface-based. Better moisture picks up there towards Friday next week. Now that looks like better moisture and looks like we've eroded most of the frontal inversion. You can see the dew points coming up into the 50s through a deep layer, and we're starting to get some steep lapse rates. So here's where organized severe potential could set up Thursday and Friday next week, and you can see that front coming south. So that'll be a convergence focus. Maybe some organized storms along that. Return flow for Sunday going into the 25th, 26th. Some severe weather potential then. You can see mostly 50s dew points, but if you get the right wave in there to destabilize that column, you can squeak something out of that. Increasing flow there. You can see that low-level jet starting up for Tuesday. I don't think we saw that on the previous charts. See that widespread 50s, 50 knots. So I think we are starting to look at the best organized severe potential around the 28th, 29th. But as we saw, unidirectional flow could be a problem. And you can see that right there. That's the layer that really matters right there. It could be better, but it's, you know, one problem here is I did intersect the storms. Let me back off on that. Go out into this area here. And yeah, unidirectional flow, you can see the 1 kilometer shear vector piled in with these 2s and 3s and 6s, very close, but just enough 0 through 1 kilometer shear. Yeah, there's no way we can forecast that 330 hours out. That's mesoscale type detail. But we know the potential is there, and we can see there's some capping. It's going to be a little bit complicated, and we're going to have to wait on that before we know exactly what's going to happen. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that and got something useful out of the video. We'll see you all tomorrow for the Thursday edition. Take care and have a good one. Bye-bye.